My name is Kara, and at 28 years old, I never imagined I would become the guardian of my grandparents and their $3 million estate. When I noticed the first signs of their memory failing, I knew my parents and sister Alice would swoop in like vultures. They had ignored my grandparents for years, but suddenly showed interest when money was involved. So after graduation, I made a decision that would change everything. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I outsmarted my greedy family and protected the people who truly raised me. The house sits on a hill overlooking the bay, a gorgeous 3-story Victorian with a wraparound porch and gardens that bloom year-round. This was not just any house. It was where I spent most of my childhood, where my grandparents Hannah and Benjamin raised me, while my parents Thomas and Grace were too busy climbing corporate ladders to notice they had a daughter. I still remember the day my parents dropped me off for what was supposed to be a weekend stay. I was only 7 years old, clutching my favorite stuffed rabbit, wondering why Mom was leaving an extra bag of clothes. That weekend turned into weeks, then months, then years. My occasional visits with my parents became more like formal meetings with strangers who happened to share my DNA. But with my grandparents, I found what true family meant. Grandma Hannah taught me to bake her famous apple pie, the recipe passed down 4 generations. We would spend hours in the kitchen floor, dusting our noses, laughing as she told stories about her own childhood. She taught me patience and how to find joy in the small moments. Grandpa Benjamin was a retired financial advisor who had built his fortune through smart investments and hard work. Every Sunday morning, we would sit on the porch swing, drinking hot chocolate, while he explained concepts like compound interest and stock markets. Most kids would be bored, but I was fascinated. He made it into a game using jelly beans to represent investments, showing me how patience and strategy could make them multiply. "The most valuable things in life, Kara," he would say, tapping my nose gently, "are not the ones you can hold in your hands, but the ones you hold in your heart." Summer vacations were spent exploring tide pools along the coast, collecting shells and sea glass that still decorate my windowsills. Winter evenings meant board games by the fireplace, Grandma bringing hot apple cider and homemade cookies, while Grandpa told stories that made us laugh until our sides hurt. My sister Alice was 5 years younger than me and stayed with our parents. They would visit on major holidays, Alice sulking and glued to her phone, my parents making empty promises about me coming home soon. But I was home. The big house on the hill with its creaky floors and secret reading nooks was where I belonged. When I turned 16, I overheard my parents discussing the house during Thanksgiving dinner. "Must be worth a fortune now," my father whispered to my mother. "Prime real estate. When the time comes." My mother nodded, shooting a glance at my grandparents who were helping me set the table. We should talk to them about their will. Something cold settled in my stomach that day. I recognized the gleam in their eyes. It was the same look they had when discussing business acquisitions or successful deals. Not once did they mention my grandparents' health or happiness, just the value of what they might inherit. On my 18th birthday, Grandpa Benjamin took me to his study, a room filled with books and the comforting smell of leather and old paper. He closed the door and sat across from me, his hands slightly trembling as he handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a vintage key on a silver chain. "This was my mother's," he explained. "She gave it to me when I turned 18. It belonged to our first family home." I slipped the chain around my neck, the key resting against my heart. "Kara," he continued, his voice growing serious, "your grandmother and I have been talking. This house has been in our family for generations. We want it to stay that way." My heart quickened as he explained their decision. "We've seen how you love this place, how you care for it, and for us, your parents." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They have different priorities. We've decided that when the time comes, the house and everything in it will go to you." I protested immediately. "But what about Mom and Dad and Alice?" Grandma Hannah, who had quietly entered the room, sat beside me. "Your parents have their own home, their own lives. They never wanted this place except for what it could give them financially. And Alice, well, she barely knows us. She took my hand in hers. You are the one who appreciates our family history, who understands what this house means. That night, under the stars on the porch, Swing Grandpa shared stories of the family members who had lived in the house before us. How his grandfather had built it with his own hands, how his father had preserved it through the Great Depression, how he and Hannah had modernized it while keeping its soul intact. Promise me you will keep it in the family, he said. Not just the structure, but what it represents. The values, the memories, the love. I promised, not knowing how soon I would be tested. Throughout college, I came home every weekend helping Grandma with her garden, assisting Grandpa with home repairs. While other students partied, I learned how to fix leaky faucets, replace window screens, and maintain the ancient heating system. I was investing in my future, in the legacy they would one day entrust to me. During my senior year studying finance in honor of Grandpa, we had many conversations about the future. He showed me all the important documents, the property deeds, the investment portfolios, and the family heirlooms with their histories written in his neat handwriting. You have a good head on your shoulders, he would say proudly. Better than your father ever did. He sees dollar signs where he should see heritage. One evening, as we sat reviewing his investment strategy, he looked at me with unusual seriousness. Kara, I want you to know something. Your grandmother and I have made arrangements. The house and our assets are worth about $3 million now. We have it all documented that it goes to you. I swallowed hard. Have you told Mom and Dad? He shook his head. They wouldn't understand our reasons. They would only see what they think they deserve, not what we choose to give. I nodded, understanding the weight of what he was entrusting to me. Not just money or property, but the responsibility of honoring generations of hard work and love. I will protect it, I promised, and everything it stands for. Little did I know how soon that promise would be tested, or what lengths I would go to keep it. The first signs were subtle, almost easy to dismiss. During Grandpa Benjamin's 85th birthday celebration, he introduced me to his oldest friend, Robert, as my granddaughter. His face clouded with confusion before he recovered with a laugh. Forgive me, Robert. My memory isn't what it used to be. I brushed it off as a momentary lapse. After all, he was turning 85. But then came other incidents. He told the same story about his first car 3 times at dinner. He misplaced his glasses, only to find them in the refrigerator. Grandma Hannah called me by my mother's name twice in one afternoon. Each incident on its own seemed harmless, but together they formed a pattern that made my stomach knot with worry. I began researching memory loss and aging, spending late nights on my laptop reading about everything from normal age-related forgetfulness to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. The more I read, the more I recognize the symptoms. Getting lost while driving familiar routes, forgetting how to play favorite card games. The confused expressions when confronted with simple decisions like what to have for breakfast. 2 months after the birthday party, I convinced them to see Dr. Michael Chen for a checkup. I sat in the sterile examination room, holding Grandma's hand, while Dr. Chen asked Grandpa a series of questions. What year is it? 2019. It was actually 2021. Who is the current president? A long pause. Well, there have been so many lately. The diagnosis came like a physical blow. Early-stage Alzheimer's for Grandpa. Mild cognitive impairment for Grandma. Possibly the beginning stages of dementia. Dr. Chen was kind, but direct. These conditions are progressive, he explained gently. You should start thinking about long-term care plans. On the drive home, my grandparents were quiet, holding hands in the back seat. I caught Grandpa's eye in the rearview mirror. I'm not gone yet, Kara, he said with a small smile. Just a little foggy around the edges. That night, I cried myself to sleep, then woke up determined. I ordered books on caregiving, joined online support groups, and started learning everything I could about how to support them through what was coming. I modified the house, installing grab bars in the bathrooms, removing trip hazards, labeling cabinets, and setting up medication reminders. Then something strange happened. My parents, who had limited their visits to major holidays and the occasional Sunday dinner, suddenly became regular fixtures at the house. My mother started calling daily, asking about doctor appointments and medication schedules. "We're just concerned," she would say, her voice dripping with a sweetness I had never heard directed at me before. "You have so much on your plate with finishing school. Maybe we should look into assisted living." My father began examining the house during visits, commenting on repair needs and property values. "Waterfront property like this is going for a premium now," he mentioned casually while helping me wash dishes. "Must be worth at least $3 million in today's market." Most surprising was my sister Alice, now 23, and working as a paralegal at a law firm specializing in estate planning. She suddenly moved from her apartment in the city to a rental just 10 minutes from our grandparents' house. "I just want to be closer to help out," she explained. Though in the 15 years I had lived with my grandparents, she had never once expressed interest in spending time with them. One evening, while bringing in groceries, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, grocery bags still in hand. "Mom's signature isn't what it used to be," my father was saying, "and Dad gets confused about what he's signing." "That's why we need to act now," my mother replied. "Before it gets worse. If we wait too long, it will get complicated." "Alice says we need power of attorney," my father continued. "She can help with the paperwork." "What about Kara?" my mother asked. There was a pause. "She's too emotional about this place. Too attached. She won't see reason about what's best for everyone." I retreated silently, my heart pounding. That night I lay awake thinking about their words. What's best for everyone clearly meant what was best for them. The next morning, I found Alice sitting with Grandma at the kitchen table, a stack of papers between them. "Just some forms for the doctor," Alice explained smoothly when I asked what they were doing. "Insurance stuff." But when she went to the bathroom, I glanced at the papers. They weren't medical forms. They were legal documents with words like transfer and property deed visible in the headers. Later that week, I came home early from class to find my mother sitting with Grandpa in his study, a pen in his hand, and a document in front of him. "Just some updates to their will," she explained quickly, sliding the paper into a folder. "Nothing important." But Grandpa looked confused. "Was I supposed to sign something?" he asked after she left. I began keeping closer tabs on their visits, making sure I was present whenever possible. I started a journal documenting each suspicious interaction, each strange comment. I set up a small recording device in the living room after getting consent from my grandparents during a lucid period. "Someone needs to know what's really happening," Grandpa had said, his eyes clear and determined when I explained my concerns. "We trust you, Kara." One recording captured my father explaining to my increasingly confused grandparents that they needed to update their estate planning and that he would take care of everything. Another caught my sister explaining that they should sign papers that would make things easier for everyone. The final straw came when I found a checkbook I didn't recognize in Grandma's knitting basket. It was for a new joint account with my mother's name on it. 3 checks had already been written for large amounts. When I gently asked Grandma about it, she became agitated. "Your mother said we needed to consolidate accounts, for simplicity." Her hands trembled. Did I do something wrong? I assured her she hadn't, but inside I was furious. They were taking advantage of 2 people who had shown nothing but love and generosity their entire lives. That night I confronted my parents during their visit, asking about the new account and the documents they had been bringing over. My father's face hardened. "We're just helping organize their affairs. They're clearly not capable anymore." "And you are?" I challenged. "We're their children," my mother snapped. "Not you. We have rights." "Rights to what?" I asked quietly. "Their money? Their house?" Don't be dramatic, my father said dismissively. We're looking out for their best interests. And yours just happened to align perfectly, I replied. My sister, who had been silent, finally spoke. Kara, you're not thinking clearly. Grandma and Grandpa need professional care. The house could pay for the best facilities. They don't want to leave their home, I said firmly, and I promised to help them stay here as long as possible. My mother laughed coldly. Promises to people who can't remember them don't count for much. In that moment, I knew I had to act quickly. My graduation was in 2 weeks. After that, I would have no more excuses for not being at the house full time, and I had a sinking feeling that my family was accelerating their plans. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart but a clear purpose. I would not let them take advantage of the 2 people who had given me everything. I just needed to figure out how to stop them. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. My senior thesis was on estate planning and tax efficiency for high net worth individuals. What had started as a topic inspired by Grandpa's teachings had become unexpectedly relevant to my own situation. The day after confronting my parents, I stayed late at the university library researching elder law and asset protection. The more I read, the more I understood what my family was attempting to do and what I needed to do to stop them. I learned about guardianship, conservatorship, power of attorney, and various trust structures. I took careful notes, highlighting the options that would best protect my grandparents while respecting their wishes. The next morning, I called 5 different elder law attorneys before finding Janet Powell. Her receptionist initially said she was booked solid for 3 weeks, but when I briefly explained my situation, Janet herself called me back within the hour. I've seen this scenario too many times, she said after I detailed my concerns. Adult children suddenly reappearing when there's money involved, pushing for control, under the guise of helping. Let's meet tomorrow. Bring any documentation you have. Janet's office was warm and inviting, nothing like the intimidating law firms I had imagined. She was in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and a direct manner that immediately put me at ease. Based on what you've told me, she said after reviewing my notes and recordings, we need to act quickly. Your grandparents still have periods of lucidity, correct? I nodded. Then we have options. The best protection would be an irrevocable trust. Your grandparents would transfer ownership of their assets, including the house, into the trust. They would name you as trustee, giving you legal authority to manage those assets according to their wishes. Is that ethical? I asked hesitantly. I mean, they're cognitively impaired. Janet leaned forward. That's why we do this during periods of lucidity. We'll have them evaluated by an independent doctor who can certify they understand what they're doing. And from what you've described, this is exactly what they want. We're not manipulating them. We're helping them protect their wishes before they lose the capacity to express them. She explained how the trust would work. Once assets were transferred, my parents and sister would have no legal claim to them. The trust would specify how the assets should be used primarily for my grandparents' care. And, as trustee, I would have a fiduciary responsibility to follow those specifications. What about my parents challenging it? I asked. They can try, Janet said. But if we do this right with proper medical documentation and clear evidence of your grandparents' wishes, any challenge would be difficult and expensive. Most importantly, it would delay their access to the assets, which doesn't sound like something they'd want. I left Janet's office with a mix of determination and anxiety. The next step was the hardest, discussing this with my grandparents. I chose a morning when they were both typically at their best. After breakfast, I sat them down in the sunroom, their favorite place to read and watch birds at the feeders. Grandma, Grandpa, I began gently. I need to talk to you about something important, about the house and your savings. They exchanged glances. We already told you, Grandpa said. It's all going to you. I know, I said, but I'm worried about Mom and Dad and Alice. They've been bringing papers for you to sign. I think they're trying to take control of your assets. Grandma's face darkened. Your mother always wanted this house. Not to live in. To sell. I've been doing some research, I continued. There's a way to make sure your wishes are respected even if. I couldn't finish the sentence. Even when we can't remember them ourselves, Grandpa finished for me. His eyes were clear that morning, the Benjamin I had always known looking back at me. Tell us. I explained the concept of the irrevocable trust as simply as I could, how it would protect them and their assets, how it would ensure the house remained in the family as they wished, how it would guarantee their care according to their preferences. When I finished, they were quiet for a long moment. Then Grandpa reached for Grandma's hand. We've been worried, he admitted, about what would happen when we couldn't make decisions anymore, about who would protect this place. His eyes swept around the room, taking in the home they had loved for decades. I trust you, Kara, more than anyone. Grandma nodded. Let's do it, while we still can. The next week was a flurry of activity. Janet arranged for a geriatric psychiatrist to evaluate my grandparents, confirming they had the capacity to understand and consent to the trust arrangement. We drafted the trust document together with Janet, explaining each provision in simple terms. The trust specified that the house and all financial assets would be used first and foremost for my grandparents' care and comfort. It outlined their preferences for home care versus institutional care. It named me as trustee, with full authority to manage the assets according to these guidelines. And it explicitly excluded my parents and sister from any control over the assets or decisions about my grandparents' care. They're going to be angry, I said as we reviewed the final draft. Janet nodded. Probably. But this isn't about them. It's about honoring Benjamin and Hannah's wishes. The day we signed the documents, my grandparents dressed in their Sunday best. Grandpa wore a tie. Grandma put on her pearl necklace. It was as if they understood the solemnity of the occasion. The signing was witnessed by Janet's assistant and the psychiatrist who had evaluated them. As they signed each page, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Whatever happened next, their wishes were now legally protected. The next step was transferring the assets into the trust. The house required a new deed which Janet filed with the county recorder's office. The investment accounts needed new paperwork designating the trust as owner. We set up a new bank account in the trust's name for day-to-day expenses. It was complicated and sometimes frustrating. There were forms that needed to be submitted multiple times, phone calls with account managers who didn't understand what we were trying to do, visits to bank branches where we had to explain everything from scratch. Through it all, Janet was patient and persistent. This is normal, she assured me. Financial institutions don't make it easy to transfer assets out of their control. But we'll get it done. And we did. 3 weeks after our initial meeting, the house and all major assets were legally held by the Benjamin and Hannah Davis Family Trust, with me as trustee. I had copies of all the documents in a safe deposit box, with additional copies in Janet's office. The timing couldn't have been better. Just 2 days after we completed the last transfer, my grandparents had a particularly bad day. Grandpa couldn't remember how to tie his shoes. Grandma became disoriented in the garden she had tended for 40 years. As I helped them through the day, I realized how close we had come to missing our window of opportunity. If we had waited even a few more weeks, they might not have had the legal capacity to create the trust. That night, after they were asleep, I sat on the porch swing, feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. I was now legally and morally responsible for their well-being and for preserving everything they had built. But I also felt a profound sense of peace. I had kept my promise to protect their legacy. Whatever came next, I was ready. 6 months passed since the trust was established. I had graduated with honors and turned down several job offers in favor of working remotely as a financial analyst, allowing me to stay at the house with my grandparents. Their condition deteriorated faster than any of us had anticipated. Grandpa Benjamin now had trouble recognizing me on his bad days. He would wander the house at night looking for his parents who had been gone for decades. Grandma Hannah could still bake her apple pie but would forget it was in the oven, leading to several small kitchen fires. I hired Elizabeth, a home health aide who specialized in memory care, to help during the day while I worked. She was a godsend patient and kind, with a knack for redirecting confusion into productive activities. Mr. Davis loves to sort things, she told me one afternoon. We spent an hour organizing buttons by color today. It calms him. The days fell into a routine. I would get up early to make breakfast and give them their medications. Elizabeth would arrive at 8, allowing me to work until 4. Then I would take over making dinner and spending the evening with them, looking through photo albums that sometimes triggered moments of clarity. At night, after they were asleep, I would catch up on household management, paying bills from the trust account, scheduling maintenance, and documenting everything meticulously as Janet had advised. My parents and Alice continued their visits, but with a different energy now. They were solicitous and overly helpful in front of Elizabeth and the visiting nurse, but I caught the calculating looks, the whispered conversations, the not-so-subtle questions about finances. "Have you thought more about assisted living?" my mother asked during Sunday dinner. "It would be so much easier for everyone." "They want to stay home," I replied, the same answer I gave every time, and I promised to honor that as long as possible. "But this house," my father interjected, gesturing around the dining room. "It's too much to maintain. The money tied up in it could provide for excellent care facilities." I simply nodded and changed the subject. I never mentioned the trust watching as they grew increasingly frustrated by my evasiveness about financial matters. Alice took a different approach, befriending Elizabeth and stopping by when she knew I would be working. I only discovered this because Elizabeth, loyal to my grandparents, and now to me, reported these visits. "She brings papers sometimes," Elizabeth told me. "Asks if your grandparents would like to review them. I always say they're not having a good day for that sort of thing." One afternoon, Elizabeth texted me during a work call, "Alice here with notary. Come home now." I made an excuse to end the call early and rushed downstairs to find Alice sitting with my grandparents at the kitchen table, a middle-aged man in a suit beside her. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Alice smiled brightly. "Just updating some paperwork for Grandma and Grandpa. This is Mr. Peterson. He's a notary from my office." Grandpa looked confused, his hands fidgeting with the papers in front of him. Grandma was staring out the window, not engaged at all. "I handle their paperwork now," I said firmly. "As you can see, today isn't a good day for them to be signing anything." "This is just routine," Alice insisted. "Nothing complicated." I stepped closer to the table and glanced at the document. It was a power of attorney form giving Alice authority to make financial decisions. "Mr. Peterson," I addressed the notary directly, "are you aware that my grandparents have been diagnosed with cognitive impairments? That they lack the capacity to understand legal documents?" The man looked uncomfortable. "Miss Thompson assured me they had lucid periods, and today was a good day." "It's not," I said flatly, "and I'm going to have to ask you to leave." After they left, I found Elizabeth in the laundry room, clearly upset. "I tried to stall them until you got here," she said. "They told me it was a family matter and I should take a break." I reassured her she had done the right thing by texting me. That night, I called Janet and explained what had happened. "They're getting desperate," she observed. "But without the assets already in their names, a power of attorney wouldn't do them much good anyway." The next day, while helping Grandma sort through her closet, I found her handbag stuffed with bank statements I didn't recognize. They showed a new account at a different bank with my mother as joint owner. The most recent statement showed a balance of $50,000. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that the bulk of their assets were protected in the trust. This was concerning but not catastrophic. When I gently asked Grandma about it, she became agitated. Grace said we needed emergency money, that you might not understand some of our expenses. She clutched my hand. Did I do something wrong, Kara? No, Grandma, I assured her. You didn't do anything wrong. I decided not to confront my parents about this directly. Instead, I increased my vigilance, asking Elizabeth to never leave them alone with any family members and installing a small camera system that would alert me to visitors when I wasn't home. The situation came to a head when I intercepted a call from a real estate agent asking to schedule a viewing of the property. Confused, I identified myself as the property manager and asked what they were talking about. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson said they were planning to list the house next month, the agent explained cheerfully. They asked me to do a preliminary valuation. My blood ran cold. I thanked the agent, saying there must have been a misunderstanding, and hung up. That Sunday, when my parents arrived for dinner, I confronted them in the kitchen while Grandpa was napping and Grandma was watching television with Elizabeth. Why is a real estate agent calling about listing the house? I asked directly. My father barely flinched. We're just exploring options. Your grandparents need more care than you can provide here. That's not your decision to make, I reminded him. Actually, my mother cut in as their daughter. I have every right to look out for their best interests when they can no longer do so themselves. And selling their home is in their best interest, I challenged. The money would provide for better care than they could ever get here, she insisted. And let's be honest, Kara, you're 28. Do you really want to spend the next few years as a full-time caregiver? This isn't fair to you either. Her false concern almost made me laugh. I promised them they could stay home. That's what matters to me. My father's patience visibly thinned. This isn't just about what you promised them. This is about what's practical. And about what you stand to gain, I added quietly. His face flushed. Be careful, Kara. We are still your parents. And they are still your parents, I countered. Yet here you are planning to sell their home out from under them. The conversation ended in a stalemate, with them insisting they only wanted what was best for everyone, and me refusing to discuss the matter further. As they were leaving, my mother paused at the door. We have an appointment with our lawyer next week. There are things in motion you don't understand, Kara. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. After they left, I sat on the porch, my heart racing. They were planning something, and I needed to be ready. A normal Tuesday morning shattered with the ping of a text message. I was working in my makeshift office in the sunroom, keeping an eye on Grandpa, who was dozing in his favorite armchair while Elizabeth helped Grandma with her bath. The message was from Jeffrey, our neighbor of 15 years. Someone is measuring your front yard. Said they're from a real estate company. Did you hire them? I thanked him and rushed to the front window. Sure enough, a woman in a business suit was walking the perimeter of the property, taking notes on a tablet. I threw on shoes and went outside. Can I help you? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She turned with a professional smile. Just doing some preliminary measurements for the listing. The Thompsons asked us to be thorough. The Thompsons don't own this property, I said firmly. And it's not for sale. Her smile faltered. I was told by Mr. Thompson that the sale was proceeding after the current occupants relocate this month. He has the paperwork. Whatever he showed you is incorrect, I interrupted. This property is not for sale. Not now, not next month. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Confused, she gathered her things and left. I immediately called Janet, explaining what had happened. They're getting bold, she commented. But without the actual deed, they can't sell the house. The trust owns it now. Could they have forged documents? I asked, panic rising. Possibly, but any title search would reveal the trust as the true owner. No legitimate company would proceed without that verification. I spent the rest of the day on edge, checking the security cameras, repeatedly jumping at every noise. When evening came with no further incidents, I began to relax slightly. That changed at 7:30 when headlights swept across the living room windows. My parents' car pulled into the driveway, followed by Alice's sedan. This wasn't their usual visit day, and they hadn't called ahead. I met them at the door before they could ring the bell, and potentially upset my grandparents, who were already in their pajamas watching their favorite game show. "We need to talk," my father said, without preamble, pushing past me into the foyer. My mother and Alice followed, both wearing expressions of grim satisfaction that made my stomach twist. In the kitchen, I suggested not wanting to disturb my grandparents. Once we were all seated at the kitchen table, my father pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across to me. "These are the transfer documents for the house," he announced. "Signed by your grandparents last month, transferring ownership to your mother." I opened the folder with steady hands, though my heart was racing. Inside were what appeared to be property transfer documents with signatures that resembled my grandparents on the bottom. "These are forgeries," I said, calmly closing the folder. "They most certainly are not," my mother snapped. "A notary verified their signatures." "Let me guess," I replied. "The same notary Alice brought here that day." Alice shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. "Regardless," my father continued, "the property is now legally in your mother's name. We've been patient, Kara, but it's time for some changes." "What kind of changes?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your grandparents need professional care. We've found an excellent memory care facility in Boston. They have openings for both of them starting next week." "And the house?" I prompted. My mother at least had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "We'll be listing it. The proceeds will help pay for their care, of course." "Of course," I echoed flatly. "And where am I supposed to go?" "You're a college graduate with a job," my father said dismissively. "It's time you found your own place anyway. We're giving you until Friday to pack your things and make arrangements." I looked at each of them in turn. My father confident and smug. My mother attempting to mask her greed with false concern. Alice avoiding my eyes, but clearly complicit. "You really think I'd let that happen?" I asked quietly. My father's smile faltered slightly. "This isn't up for debate. The paperwork is filed. The house belongs to your mother now." I stood up slowly. "I think you should leave." "Did you not hear what Dad just said?" Alice finally spoke up. "This isn't your house anymore." "I heard him," I replied calmly. "And now, I'm asking you all to leave. We can discuss this further after I've had time to review these documents." "There's nothing to review," my father insisted. "Be out by Friday, and start preparing your grandparents for the move." They left in a cloud of self-satisfaction, my mother, already discussing paint colors for the refresh before listing. As soon as their cars pulled away, I called Janet. Despite the late hour, she answered on the second ring. "They have forged transfer documents," I explained, my voice finally shaking now that I was alone. "They're claiming the house belongs to my mother. They want me out by Friday and are planning to move my grandparents to a facility in Boston." "Scan and send me those documents right now," Janet instructed. "Then take a deep breath. Remember, the house is already in the trust. Whatever they've forged won't stand up to legal scrutiny." I did as she asked, then sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands. The audacity of their plan was breathtaking. They had clearly been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. Janet called back 20 minutes later. "These are poorly done forgeries," she said. "The notary stamp is from someone whose license expired last year. And the signatures don't match your grandparents on the trust documents." "So what do we do?" "We let them come back," Janet said decisively. "But this time we'll be ready." The next 2 days were a flurry of activity. Janet filed emergency motions with the probate court, alerting them to the attempted fraud. She contacted the police department to report the forgery, and she arranged for a very special welcoming committee for when my family returned. I didn't tell my grandparents what was happening. Their confusion was already severe enough. without adding this betrayal to their burden. Instead, I focused on keeping their routine as normal as possible while preparing for the confrontation to come. Friday morning, I received a text from my father movers arriving at 2 p.m. "Have your grandparents ready?" I replied simply, "We'll be here." At 1:30, Janet arrived with the documents we needed. At 1:45, a police officer named Ryan Matthews knocked on the door, followed by Harold Williams, a judge, from the probate court who had agreed to witness the proceedings personally due to the sensitive nature of the situation. "Are you ready for this?" Janet asked as we arranged ourselves in the living room. I took a deep breath and nodded. They've left me no choice. At precisely 2 o'clock, a moving truck pulled into the driveway, followed by my parents' and sister's cars. I stepped onto the porch to meet them, Janet and the others waiting just inside. "Right on time," I said as they approached. My father smiled confidently. "I see you've accepted the situation. Good. The movers will start with your grandparents' bedroom furniture. They'll need something familiar in their new place." "Before we get to that," I replied, opening the front door, "there are some people you should meet." Their smiles froze as they saw who was waiting in the foyer. The morning after my family's ultimatum, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Their brazen attempt to steal my grandparents' home had crossed every line, but in doing so, they had also made a critical mistake. They had shown their hand too early before securing actual legal ownership. Janet arrived at 8, carrying a thick legal portfolio and wearing what she called her courtroom face, a steely expression that made me grateful she was on my side. "We need to document everything," she explained as we sat at the kitchen table. "The forged documents, the conversations, the threats, everything that proves they're attempting to defraud your grandparents." I pulled out the journal I had been keeping for months, detailing every suspicious visit, every strange comment, every attempt to get my grandparents to sign papers. "This is excellent," Janet said, flipping through the pages. "But we need more. Medical documentation, proving your grandparents' cognitive state, makes them vulnerable to exploitation. Witnesses who can testify to your family's behavior. And ironclad proof that the trust is the legal owner of the property." Our first stop was Dr. Michael's office. Despite his busy schedule, he agreed to see us immediately when his receptionist explained the situation. "Elder financial abuse is something I take very seriously," he said grimly after I explained what was happening. "I've seen it destroy families and leave vulnerable seniors destitute." He provided detailed medical records documenting my grandparents' cognitive decline over the past year, along with a formal letter stating that in his professional opinion they had lacked the capacity to understand and consent to property transfers for at least 6 months. "I would be willing to testify to this in court if necessary," he added as we left. Next, we visited the county records office to obtain certified copies of the property deed showing the transfer to the trust, which had been properly recorded months earlier. "This is the legal record of ownership," the clerk explained, stamping the documents. "Anyone performing due diligence would see that the property belongs to the Benjamin and Hannah Davis Family Trust, not to any individual." Janet nodded with satisfaction. "Perfect. Now let's visit the police station." Detective Sarah Miller listened carefully as we explained the situation, examining the forged documents with a practiced eye. "The notary stamp alone is problematic," she noted. "Using an expired notary stamp in an attempt to validate legal documents is fraud. And if these signatures were forged, that's another serious offense." She took formal statements from both of us and made copies of all our evidence. "I can't promise immediate action," she cautioned, "but we'll investigate. In the meantime, document any further attempts they make to enter the property or remove your grandparents." As we left the station, Janet made a call to Judge Harold Williams, a respected figure in the probate court who had worked with her on several elder protection cases. "Harold, it's Janet Powell. I have a situation that needs your immediate attention." "Yes, it's exactly that kind of case. Tomorrow at 1:30, perfect. She ended the call with a satisfied nod. Judge Williams has agreed to come to the house tomorrow to witness what happens. Having a judge present will add significant weight to our position. Back at home, I found Elizabeth sitting with my grandparents in the garden. She pulled me aside while they were admiring the roses. Alice called twice while you were out, she reported. Said she needed to discuss moving logistics with me. I told her, I only take direction from you. Thank you, I said gratefully. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what you've observed? The times Alice, or my parents, tried to get Grandma and Grandpa to sign things when I wasn't around? Elizabeth's expression hardened. Absolutely. I've worked with dementia patients for 15 years, and what they're trying to do is despicable. That evening, our neighbor Jeffrey stopped by with a basket of fresh vegetables from his garden. I saw that real estate agent yesterday, he mentioned. Seemed odd since your grandparents have always said they'd never sell this place. When I explained what was happening, his friendly expression turned to outrage. I've known Benjamin and Hannah for 20 years. They've always been clear that you were the one who would inherit this house. If you need a witness to that, count me in. By the end of the day, we had assembled a formidable collection of evidence and witnesses. Janet reviewed everything, organizing it into a cohesive presentation. Your family thinks they're going to walk in tomorrow and take ownership of a $3 million property with some forged papers and intimidation, she said. They're in for quite a surprise. The next morning, I prepared the house as if for an important gathering. I made coffee and set out cookies in the dining room. I helped my grandparents dress in comfortable but nice outfits, telling them only that we were having some visitors to discuss family business. Is Grace coming? Grandma asked, referring to my mother. She still remembered her daughter most days, though the relationship details were increasingly confused in her mind. Yes, Mom and Dad and Alice will be here, I confirmed. Grandpa patted my hand. You're a good girl, Kara, always taking care of things. His momentary clarity brought tears to my eyes. I'm trying, Grandpa. At noon, Officer Ryan Matthews arrived, introduced himself to my grandparents, and took a position in the living room. He had agreed to be present not in an official capacity, but as a deterrent to any aggressive behavior. Sometimes just having a uniform present keeps people civil, he explained. Judge Williams arrived at 1:30, a distinguished man in his 60s, with kind eyes, but a commanding presence. He spoke gently to my grandparents, then reviewed our documentation one final time. The trust is properly established, he confirmed, and the medical evidence of their incapacity is compelling. Your family has no legal ground to stand on. Janet was the last to arrive, carrying a folder containing all the documentation we had gathered, plus some additional papers she had prepared overnight. These are restraining orders, she explained. If necessary, we can serve them immediately to prevent your family from approaching your grandparents or entering the property again without supervision. We positioned ourselves strategically in the living room. My grandparents sat comfortably in their favorite chairs, largely unaware of the confrontation to come. Janet, Judge Williams, and Officer Matthews arranged themselves nearby, visible but not intimidating. I took my position on the porch, ready to greet my family for what I hoped would be the last time they attempted to take advantage of my grandparents. At precisely 2 o'clock, the moving truck pulled into the driveway, followed by my parents' car and Alice's sedan. I watched them emerge, looking confident and self-satisfied, completely unaware of what awaited them inside. As they approached the porch, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They had pushed me to this point. Now they would face the consequences of their actions. Right on time, I said, as they reached the steps. My father smiled, that patronizing smile I had grown to hate. I see you've accepted the situation. Good. The movers will start with your grandparents' bedroom furniture. They'll need something familiar in their new place. Before we get to that, I replied, opening the front door, there are some people you should meet. Their expressions froze as they saw who was waiting in the foyer. This was the moment everything would change. My parents and Alice froze on the porch, their confident smiles evaporating as they registered the scene inside. Officer Matthews stood to the left, his uniform unmistakable. Judge Williams sat in an armchair, his presence commanding respect. Janet rose from her seat, holding a thick folder of documents. "What is this?" my father demanded, his voice rising. "Who are these people?" "Please come in," I said calmly. "We have some important matters to discuss before any moving takes place." Reluctantly, they stepped inside. My mother's eyes darted nervously between the officer and the judge. Alice fidgeted with the strap of her purse, suddenly unable to meet my gaze. "I believe you have some documents claiming ownership of this property," Janet said, stepping forward and extending her hand. "I'm Janet Powell, attorney for the Benjamin and Hannah Davis Family Trust." My father's expression darkened. "Family, trust. What are you talking about?" Janet smiled thinly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm referring to the irrevocable trust established 8 months ago, to which your parents transferred all their assets, including this house. I'm sure in your rush to secure the property for yourselves, you neglected to perform a basic title search." She opened her folder and removed a certified copy of the property deed, handing it to my father. "As you can see, this house is owned by the trust, not by your parents individually. It has been for quite some time." My father scanned the document, his face growing paler by the second. My mother snatched it from his hands, her eyes widening as she read. "This can't be legal," she spluttered. "They weren't in their right minds to set up a trust." "Actually," Judge Williams interjected, rising to his feet, "I've reviewed the medical documentation from the time the trust was established. Dr. Michael certified that while Benjamin and Hannah Davis had early signs of cognitive impairment, they were still competent to understand and establish a trust at that time." He introduced himself, his authoritative tone, leaving no room for argument. "I'm Judge Harold Williams from the probate court. I've taken a particular interest in this case due to the concerning pattern of attempted elder exploitation." My father's face flushed with anger. "Exploitation? We're their children. We're trying to make sure they receive proper care." "By forging property transfer documents," Officer Matthews asked quietly. Alice gasped. My mother's hand flew to her throat. "Those signatures are genuine," my father insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Janet removed another document from her folder. "This is a statement from Dr. Michael confirming that Benjamin and Hannah Davis have lacked the capacity to understand and execute legal documents for at least 6 months. The transfers you're claiming were signed last month." She laid another paper on the table. "And this is a report from a forensic handwriting expert confirming the signatures on your documents do not match your parents' actual signatures. Furthermore," she continued relentlessly, "the notary stamp used on these documents belongs to a notary whose license expired last year. Using an expired notary stamp to validate legal documents constitutes fraud in this state." Officer Matthews stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Miss Thompson, I should inform you that we are investigating these forged documents. Fraudulent transfer of property is a serious offense." My mother collapsed onto the sofa, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "This is a misunderstanding," she insisted weakly. "We were just trying to help." "By threatening to evict your daughter and move your parents against their wishes," Judge Williams asked mildly. "By attempting to sell their home of 50 years. My father, always quick to adapt, changed tactics. Kara clearly manipulated them into creating this trust. She took advantage of their vulnerable state for her own benefit. I had expected this accusation and remained calm. I have recordings of you and Mom discussing how to get control of their assets before their condition worsened. I have Elizabeth's sworn statement about the times you brought documents for them to sign when I wasn't home. And I have our neighbor Jeffrey's affidavit confirming that Grandma and Grandpa had told him for years that I would inherit the house." Alice, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. Dad, I told you we should have checked the property records first. I told you. My father shot her a venomous look. Be quiet, Alice. Janet cleared her throat. Here's what's going to happen now. You are going to tell those movers to leave. You are going to surrender any keys you have to this property. And you are going to cease all attempts to interfere with Benjamin and Hannah's care arrangements. She removed one final document from her folder. This is a temporary restraining order. If you continue to harass this family or attempt to remove Benjamin and Hannah from their home, I will file this immediately. My father looked like he might explode. You can't keep us from our parents. We have rights. You have the right to visit them under supervision, Janet corrected, which Kara is willing to allow despite your actions. But you have no right to make decisions for them. The trust designates Kara as their caregiver and the manager of their assets. My mother began to cry, not from remorse but from thwarted plans. $3 million had just slipped through her fingers. I think we're done here, I said quietly. Please tell the movers to leave. For a moment, I thought my father might refuse. But Officer Matthews shifted slightly, a subtle reminder of his presence, and my father relented. This isn't over, he muttered, as he stormed out to dismiss the moving truck. My mother followed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Alice lingered, looking uncertain. I just went along with what they wanted, she said lamely. I didn't know about the forgery. You brought a notary here to witness fake signatures, I reminded her. You knew exactly what was happening. She had no response to that, and quickly followed our parents outside. Through the window, I watched them argue briefly with the moving truck driver who shrugged and got back into his vehicle. The truck pulled away. My parents and Alice got into their respective cars without a backward glance and drove off. The house fell silent. Judge Williams was the first to speak. You've done right by your grandparents, Kara. Not many people would have had the foresight or courage to protect them as you have. Officer Matthews nodded in agreement. I've seen too many seniors lose everything to family members who care more about inheritance than the people themselves. You should be proud. After they left, Janet stayed to help me process what had happened. We sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of gold and pink. Do you think they'll challenge the trust? I asked. Janet shook her head. They could try, but they'd fail. And given the evidence of fraud we have, they'd be risking criminal charges if they pushed too hard. My guess is they'll retreat and regroup. And never speak to me again, I added, surprised by the pang of sadness I felt despite everything. Perhaps Janet acknowledged. But sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. You chose your grandparents and they chose you. That counts for something. In the months that followed, my prediction proved correct. My parents and Alice made no further attempts to contact us or challenge the trust. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard they had moved to Florida, telling friends they needed a fresh start. I continued caring for my grandparents with Elizabeth's help. Their condition progressed as the doctors had warned, with good days becoming rarer. But they were comfortable in their familiar surroundings with people who genuinely cared for them. On Grandpa's 87th birthday, during a moment of unusual clarity, he took my hand and thanked me. You kept your promise, he said, his eyes bright with recognition. The house is still in the family, still filled with love. 6 months after the confrontation, I established the Benjamin and Hannah Davis Foundation, using a portion of the trust assets to provide support services for families caring for loved ones with dementia. The foundation funded home health aides, respite care, and legal assistance for elderly individuals at risk of exploitation. It became my way of honoring their legacy beyond just preserving the house. It transformed their assets into a force for good, helping other families avoid the painful situation we had experienced. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken action when I did. If I had been less observant of the early warning signs, less diligent in researching how to protect my grandparents, or less willing to stand up to my family, the thought of my grandparents confused and unhappy in some facility while my parents sold their beloved home makes my heart ache. The experience taught me that sometimes protecting those you love means making difficult choices. It taught me that greed can blind people to the harm they're causing, even to their own parents. And it taught me that preparation and knowledge are powerful weapons against those who would take advantage of the vulnerable. As I sit on the porch swing now, watching the sunset just as my grandparents did for decades, I know I made the right choice. The house remains a home filled with memories and love. The gardens still bloom. And though my grandparents may not always remember who I am or what I did for them, I honor their wishes. I keep their legacy alive. And in the end, that's what family should really be about. Not what you can get from someone, but what you can give. Not what you stand to inherit, but the values you choose to carry forward. Have you ever had to stand up to protect someone you love from others who wanted to take advantage of them? What would you have done in my situation? I would love to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments below. Please hit the like button if this story resonated with you, subscribe to hear more real-life experiences, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes doing the right thing means standing your ground. Thank you for listening, and remember that true love means protecting those who can no longer protect themselves.